Welcome to this podcast episode of the Hidden Heroes of Tech. This is the show where we shine a light on the brains behind all the successes we see across industries. It takes more than techies to get a product in front of a consumer. People from sales, go to market, strategy, marketing, finance, HR, operations, and of course, those techies. We talk with those who we don't know much about and hope to learn some nuggets of wisdom. Our sponsor for today's episode is the revenuedoc.com. Hello, my name is Mickey and I'm the host for today's show. I'm actually just waiting for my next guest to come in and ring the doorbell to the studio. And her name is Sonja Homes. And while we're waiting for her to join the studio, let me just tell you a little bit about her. So Sonja Homes is a distinguished HR professional and the host of her own podcast show called Own Your Work Podcast. At work, she shines as a senior client lead recruiter, backed by a rich history in staffing, customer satisfaction, and has a bachelor's in organizational communication. Beyond her professional prowess, Sonia embarked on a personal journey with her podcast, overcoming deep seated fears and insecurities. This transformative path led to the launch of her podcast, where she now inspires others towards personal and professional empowerment, while also juggling a life as a dedicated working mom of four. So I'm just waiting for her to ring the doorbell. Oh, there she is. One second. Oh, hello. Hi, Sonia. How are
Hello.
you?
Good. Hi, Mickey. I'm well.
Awesome.
I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So Sonia, I won't lie, I'm really excited to be have you on the show. Is there anything I missed off in the intro that you'd like to sort of share about yourself?
You know what? I don't think so. I heard the intro and I sound really interesting, and I'm really excited. So thanks for that intro, by the way.
Awesome, awesome. Well, here we go. So listen, today's podcast show is the topic of how to get out of your own way and voice up. So
Yeah.
can you not go into details because I just want you to give us a bit of a teaser right now as to what this is about. Can you share something?
Yeah. Well, Mickey, I really believe that, like, in order to create our what I like to call best work life yet, we and make an impact as well, both personal and professional. I believe that we have to find our voice and use our voice. So today, I'm excited to share my story, and I have some practical advice as well too, on like how I actually got out of my head and some things that I practice. So that's what I hope to share with you all today.
Awesome. So, audience, if you're listening, hang out because you're going to get some real good information and some real good advice on how to sort of get out of your own way and voice up. But before we get into the main topic, I was just wondering, is it okay if I ask you a few personal questions to get to know you a little bit more and let the
Yeah.
audience know about who you are?
Absolutely. I love this.
Okay. So, here's the first question: what did you have for breakfast today?
Yeah. So today I had Starbucks. I had a ham and cheese croissant, one of my favorite things to order there, and I had a iced matcha green tea latte. I think that's the name for it. Sometimes I get it hot, sometimes I get it cold, but this morning I had it iced, and it was great.
Awesome. And does your breakfast get inspired by anything like the mood of the day or how you get up in the morning? Like I get up in the morning sometimes when I'm down, I'll have a carby breakfast, like 4 rounds of toast with peanut butter. If I'm feeling really good when I wake up, I'll have a healthy breakfast. Anything like that?
Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to the breakfast here. I love that. I probably should do that. But I can say something interesting about me. I actually love breakfast, and on the weekend, my family, we always do the same thing. I do homemade waffles, eggs, home fries,
Oh wow.
bacon, and grits. So that's our Saturdays and Sundays every
Sounds
weekend.
sounds like
I
a
make.
great family time. Great family time for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Awesome. I should do that. Family time at breakfast. Here's another question for you. How are you doing for real today? What are you
Yeah.
feeling like?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I really appreciate that. Today, I'm actually feeling really inspired. So I'm doing well. I'm feeling good, happy, and really inspired today.
Awesome. That's good. I'm glad you're inspired because that just means we're going to get the best benefit out of you today as
Yeah.
the audience listens in on
Yeah.
your advice. Okay. Another question for you. If you had a choice between two superpowers, being invisible and flying, which one would you choose? And you've got to choose one of them.
Yeah. Oh, okay. This is a good one. If I had to choose between the two, immediately my thoughts, it just goes to I'm going to choose flying. And the reason why, when you mentioned that question, is because I feel like the season of life that I'm in, I feel that a lot of times I've been invisible and I felt invisible before. But I also what it feels like to soar. And I want to teach my kids how to soar and how to fly. Um, So I'm gonna go with flying, and being less invisible. I've definitely been felt invisible
Awesome.
before. So
Awesome. 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 Well, I'm glad you're a flyer and you know why you're flying. So, hey, this next question is an interesting one. When you go to interviews at places like McKinsey or the Boston
Yeah,
Group or, all these consulting firms, they always ask you a question that tries to, you know, gleam out insights how to somebody operates or thinks. So here's a
yeah,
question for you in that vein. Not a difficult one for you. If you could have dinner with any two famous people, dead or alive, which two would you choose and why?
yeah. So that's a great question. The first person that I think of immediately, because I would love to have a conversation with, is Oprah. Um, so I would definitely choose Oprah. I'm having a hard time thinking about who my second person would be, but I know that I would love to have a conversation with Oprah. She's definitely someone that inspires me.
So it's interesting. Let me ask you a question. If you were having dinner with Oprah, how would you use that
Yeah.
time?
Yeah, I admire her because I think she has an ability to really connect with people.
Mm,
Um, and admire her as an interviewer. I feel like she shows up with a lot of empathy and a lot of curiosity, and I think she reserves judgment a lot. So I would like learn about that. I would want to learn more about her story as well too. And yeah, I think I would really dig into that and how she comes up with the great questions, how she makes people feel safe to open up. Um, Definitely an interviewer that inspires me, so
awesome. Okay, that's really insightful there. Okay, here's something. Um, what is your spiciest opinion that most
yeah,
other people disagree with?
that's a good one as well too. Woo. You know what? I feel like I have a couple, um, but I think I'm gonna go with if a spicy opinion. Yeah, and I think a lot of people would probably disagree with this, but I don't believe it or not, I don't believe that I don't believe in always going above and beyond. And I know that's difficult to hear.
Interesting.
Um, and that's something that I've always done, and I feel like I've always adopted, as well too. But I've also realized that comes a place where there comes a time sometimes where we have to know how to like have boundaries as well. So I'm always willing to, lend a helping hand. I always do want to, obviously, and this is both in personal and professional, but for me, I've learned how to like lay down the cape and not always try to be a hero in situations, and always say yes to everything. So
Yeah.
I've had to unlearn that a lot. And I think typically like the thing that's helped me a lot in my career was always saying yes, having the yes mentality. And I think now I'm learning how to lean into no a little bit more, but also still deliver on the things that's most important, but really trying to figure out what's essential, right? What is the most essential thing that I need to be? Because otherwise, I've learned that it can lead to burnout. It could
Right.
lead to people not knowing your boundaries. It could lead to you coaching people to, saying that, hey, I'll do anything, I'll take anything, and that really is probably not what you're trying to do. So
Interesting.
I think I'm just in a different stage in my life,
Mm.
where um, I'm now putting boundaries in place, and yeah, and just creating the thing that's most authentic to me.
So
So
do you think putting boundaries in place is the same as not going above and beyond? Because I think and just listening to what you were saying, I understand the concept of not going above and beyond. It's about self care, making sure that you
mhm,
don't get hurt. But if you set boundaries and you say, this is as far as I'm willing to go,
yeah,
but in that particular thing, up to where I'm going to go to, I'll go above and beyond to do it. Is it the same
yeah.
thing? I don't know. I just,
Yeah, yeah. So I think, in the typical like right setting, right? And
mm,
you probably never say anything like that in an interview. This
mm,
is probably something that everyone disagrees with. This is every hiring manager say, no, I don't want this. But this is why I've learned to actually lean into this and be okay with it, right?
right.
I think it's setting above and beyond is above, what's expected, above and
Got it.
beyond. A lot of times when people are coming to you and they want you to go above and beyond, they want you to say yes to everything. Yeah, I'm putting this across. Hey, I need this report. I need
That's
these different things.
unreasonable
Yeah.
ask. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes, I think it's trying to get it clear on, I can make sure someone is completely satisfied. I
Mhm.
can do my job. I can, do this thing or even in my personal life, but sometimes you just have to know when and have
Correct.
agency over, over when you will and you can and
Mm,
you get to decide. So I think that is the space that I've been in for the last few years, actually. And I've still been making an impact,
yeah,
still been able to use my voice. But it's not the thing that people would want to promote. It's not the thing that people want to say, right?
right.
But if someone is saying, like, I want someone who's always going to go above and beyond, I would question, hey, are you saying that? What do you really want from them? Right.
Mm.
And having boundaries, I want others to have boundaries as well too. I want people to have agency to say no.
It's
um,
almost like it's almost like it's a little bit unfair actually. It's interesting. I'm learning a lot about what you're just saying. I would have in the past said, "Yeah, I'll go above and beyond." But what they're saying is that you're worth, I'm gonna say this, you're worth
Mhm,
$10 for doing X amount of work. But what
mhm.
I'm gonna ask you to do is do $50 work for $10,
Yeah,
or, that type of thing. That's just a very simplistic
yeah,
way of putting it. And that's actually
yeah.
unfair, isn't it? Because it's
Mhm.
almost like misrepresenting your intentions.
Yeah, yeah. And what's very interesting is I think it was a few years ago and this was a different role, but I'm thinking about like just the work experience that I had. And I remember I used to put so much emphasis on, when I would sell myself by saying like, I'm gonna come early, leave, come early, leave late. I call it the sellout because
Yeah.
it's CELL, right? Come early, leave late. And I would, sell that because I'm going to get the job done. I'll do the work of three people, right? But what I was actually doing was devaluing the quality of my work because what happened is I actually found myself in a role as a recruiting manager at the time when we didn't have any additional staff and I did the work of the recruiter, I did the work of the coordinator, I did the
Right.
work of the recruiting manager, and I found the value or I sold value in volume, but the value came from the impact that I was making.
Right.
And I had to learn how to, okay, this was definitely above and beyond, and how I started to scale back and put the boundaries in place. It really helped me, and it actually helped me to develop where I am and start to create a way more fulfilling like work life for myself and greater impact by actually, putting more emphasis on like the impact versus selling by like the volume and that I have no boundaries and I'm going to do whatever it takes. Like, no, I won't do whatever it takes, but
Yeah.
I'm going to get the job done and we're going to be able to have conversations that like what's reasonable, what are the expectations and what can I realistically deliver upon within my capacity.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing that because, you know, that sort of is a little bit of the work that you've already been doing and some of the things that you're
mhm.
helping people with. And that brings us into, the topic of today's show, how to get out of your own way and voice up. And I guess that what you just described is a good segue because that is partly getting in your own way, I guess.
Yeah.
By what we're describing, just by saying I'm going to go above and beyond, you're stopping yourself from succeeding to your best capabilities, I guess. You know, so let's start with today's show. Let's talk a little bit more about the teaser you gave us. What we're talking about today.
Yeah. Yeah. So really how to like get out of your own way. I call it for me, I was in my head a lot. And like how do I find my voice? How do I start to use my voice? And start making the impact and start creating my most authentic and aligned life. But it starts with me getting clear on like what I actually want, my voice, my inner voice, and then actually, stepping out and being vocal and using my voice in different settings to advocate and to do that. So, that's what I want to talk about today with,
Okay.
in my story and my personal journey with that.
So let's ask you. So you said something which I was just listening to. You said inner voice and voice. So just
Mhm.
distinguish the two things for me a little bit.
Yeah. So when I started like this whole journey and this process of myself, for a long time, I felt like when I didn't speak up, right? I already had opinions I
Mhm.
had a point of view and I had a perspective. That is my inner voice. And sometimes you can be in a meeting, you could be anywhere, and then you have an opinion on maybe the topic at hand, right? You have a perspective or you have a point of view. But a lot of times we're reluctant to share that when we are like in our own way or ahead, or maybe sometimes we just aren't comfortable for whatever reason. There's a lot of different reasons why we don't or why we choose not to speak up. But your inner voice, I found that my inner voice is my point of view. It's my values. It's my perspective. It's my unique experience, you know, um, and so that's what for me
Got
my
it.
inner voice makes
Yeah,
up
so
those
so that makes
values.
it so these are the things that we internalize,
Hmm.
and sometimes when we're talking about not getting out of our own ways and voicing up, is sharing how we feel about something which
Yeah.
we had struggled to share. And
Hmm.
does that lead to any difficulties in, if you all of a sudden, so things that come to mind to me when you say that is apprehension. If I feel strongly about something, and I think I'm going to share it in an executive meeting that could potentially have some detrimental career impacts, you know,
Hmm.
or that's certainly my belief. Do you
Hmm.
think that is the case, or how do people deal with that?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of different reasons why people don't speak up. It's interesting. I had a conversation with someone recently who just released a book that I'm so excited. I just started to dig into, but it's called
Yeah.
Unlearning Silence, and I think she goes into it very nuanced because I think there's a lot of different things. But I think for me, in my experience, when I started to do like a deep dive, like personally, I found that yes, sometimes there is a fear of retribution. Sometimes you don't want to speak up because there's this fear of how, if I say this, if I am too honest, if I am authentic, how will this come off? How will it be received?
Mm,
Right? Will I be heard? There's a lot of those thoughts as well, too, right? So I think there's a lot of times we have to take those things into consideration, right? Will this be received? So sometimes there's that thought as well, too. Um, but then there's other things as well too, that other stories that we might tell ourselves, other reasons. And some of the things that stopped me from speaking up was, just fear. Like, so I found myself afraid of how it would sound, how it would look. What if I came off unpolished, right? Or
yeah.
incompetent? What if I said the wrong thing, right? What if, I thought about these things, right? Or I also did the comparison thing. I think sometimes some of the stories that we tell ourselves in order to speak up is that we have to sound like so and so. So,
Yeah.
I have to sound like that person who is charismatic. I have to
Mm,
deliver in a certain way, so I think there's that comparison as well too. Um, there's also a very legitimate like nervousness or anxiety that we can have that shows up, in our body as well too, that can stop us. So you might have this feeling of these sensations in your body, right? Like I've literally experienced like a tingling in my stomach, before I press unmute, like being like, so
mm,
this is how it would manifest. And that feeling for me was just like this anxiety or this before it, I didn't even know why. Why am I feeling like this within
right.
my nervous system, right? So there's a lot of different things, right, that can manifest, that can show up for us. Um, and there was this other part of me as that's like, I identify as someone who's, introverted. Like, am I going to be
Mm,
inauthentic if I
right.
show up in this way? Like, does that make me an extrovert or does that mean that I'm trying to be someon that I'm not?
That's
Right. So
interesting.
am I being
It's a lot.
inauthentic to myself? There's a lot of different things that we weigh and that we
Oh my
calculate,
god.
that doesn't mean that I'm being inauthentic to myself and showing up a different way. It means that I actually do have something of value to say. And I'm going to, push through and say the things that I want to say, right?
Mm,
The purpose of me speaking is because I have something of value to say. I don't
yeah.
believe in speaking just to speak, right? Just to
Yeah.
be heard. So I think there's a lot of just different things that
Yeah.
I just think about to overcome and that I've learned. But I think those are the main things that I think about that has stopped me
Yeah.
from speaking up.
So that's interesting. So that's the sort of the basis of what you're doing to help create careers and personal development. So
Mhm.
let's switch gears a little bit to that. And how are you helping to do that? So what does it mean to
Yeah.
say helping to create careers? Because that's a big big old statement, that isn't it? So
Yeah.
yeah, go for
Yeah.
it.
So to create career, and I call it like your best work life, right? That's one that actually works for you. And the reason why I like go through like the voice, and I actually have a very practical like voice framework for people who've struggled like me to actually, speak up. I have a framework that I use to get out of your head, and this is how you do it. This is how you begin to practice. But
Voice
when I,
I got a voice framework. I've never heard that term before.
yeah.
What is that exactly before we go any further?
Okay. So I'm a really big person on like I need frameworks. I need sometimes prescription, keep it simple. And I actually was inspired by it's an author, Brittany Cole, but she had a framework and it was voice. And during a time where I was trying to, get out of my head. And I remember her voice, it was like, can't remember everything, but I remember like the C was for courage, the E was for every day, I think the O was for organize your thoughts. So I was like, this is amazing, but I need something that I can actually practice so I can get out of my head and do. So I needed prescription in the beginning. So I created a framework for myself that really helped me to like unmute and do. And this is what I was going to say to start practicing.
And what does that
So,
look like? So, as
yeah.
in, yeah, what are the buttons
So
we press? Yeah.
yes. So after you unmute, right? So the V is for value. And so this is part is twofold. So the value is number one is my purpose of press unmuting and sharing is to add value to the conversation. So I always start there, right? But also to many times when we're in settings and we're in conversations, there's a shared value that whether it's a team or there's that you have amongst you, and sometimes when we have these conversations when we're trying to solve, those things are missing. So sometimes it's even bringing the values back to the conversation, but the
Right.
purpose is to add value. The O for me that helped me to get out of my head and actually start speaking up was I would ask myself these questions, right? What do I have a value to add right here, right? What are our values? The O for me was opinions, right? What is my opinion on this, on the topic at hand, at the question that was asked, right? What is my opinion? What are my initial thoughts to what's being shared today? Right. So that is the O for me. It's my opinion. It is my initial reactions. And these are the questions that I actually ask myself during the meetings. What do I think about this?
Mhm.
Right. So I'm actually internalizing and I'm processing, I'm speeding up the process time. Right.
Right.
So I'm doing it live there. The I for me is for insights. Right. And these are the things that I actually share. So when I press unmute, I'm sharing my opinion, my initial reactions. I'm sharing either or my insights, right? And sometimes your insights, it could be information or data that you know specifically because of your experience. So most of the conversations that I'm having, they're probably around like talent, right?
Mhm.
Recruiting, things like that. I have specific insights to things from the market trends and things because I stay on top of this, because I'm in the market, because, so a lot of times I can bring my insights to a conversation. So sometimes that unmute is me adding my insights. This is data. This is sometimes statistics that I know. What unique insight do you have? So that's the I.
Right.
The C for me is the critical questions, right? Is there a critical question that you can add to contribute to this conversation? I found that a lot of times I'll be in a meeting and sometimes the critical question is just asking something simple as, you're trying to plan and you're doing, say you're coming up with a project and you're trying to plan for your target audience and you didn't even survey them. Sometimes it can be a very simple, critical question that can drive clarity. Sometimes maybe it can even challenge, predominant thought that's going on right now. But critical question is what I do for the C. And a lot of
Okay.
times, when I'm processing things or I'm in a meeting, sometimes there's questions that I'm having. So I write those down and that's what I'm speaking up. That's what I'm adding and contributing to contribute value to the conversation. And then finally, the E of the voice is for my experience. I usually ask myself, right, within this, do I have anything that's any unique experience within this conversation or within this topic that I can add to help bring color to the conversation? And so, I usually would bring that in and it looks different in every conversation, but I mean, those are like the main things that I'm thinking about when I'm finding my voice in the moment and adding to a conversation. But I also go through these different things and just being introspective as well too. I go through that same voice to framework to just be introspective and just to know where I'm at on certain things. The more that you can get to know your inner voice, the more you can actually start to use it externally and actually voice it. I found for myself at least.
That's really cool. So the voice framework is V for value, O for opinions, I for insights, C for critical questions, and two, your experience that you bring. And then that sort of gives you that confidence you need to actually
Mhm.
voice up, I guess. Is that how you do it? Making sure those components are in place. And I guess
Yeah.
just are you saying when you know you've got these five critical pieces of data points, you're actually confident to speak up, knowing that you've got something ready. And I guess the opposite of that is if you have one of these missing, does it stop you from speaking up?
Absolutely not. In fact, you don't have to have all of these, right?
Right.
A lot of times when I'm contributing, it's not that I need to have all of these. It's if I have one of these, I probably have something of value to add to this conversation. And I
Uh-huh.
think for me, a long time is that, I didn't know what to say. I would have a lot of different thoughts, but I didn't know how to organize them quickly. And I didn't know what category they fell in, so that really helped me to, you know, just what I was going to contribute and
Okay.
one of the things that I contribute, but you don't have to contribute all. I actually had one time in a meeting where I did contribute all and it, went through this, but it flowed very easily. But it became something for me, an easy way for me to begin
Right.
practicing every opportunity that I had. So I would begin to practice this framework so I can start building
Yeah.
and building that muscle of speaking up.
So I guess one of the challenges then comes once you speak up, there's this fear of, no, I wouldn't call it fear, but then there's the other challenge. You're going to maybe the only voice in the room that come up with the idea, and you could end up taking up a whole load of work.
Mhm.
So it then moves on to the next topic, which is having boundaries. So how do you stop yourself ending up being dumped on, after you've
Mhm.
spoken up?
Yeah, that's a very, really good question. So I really think that we should have, and this is something that I like have as well too. It's funny, I had a created a worksheet. I did an episode on this before, and it's called like how to have a criteria for yes, because there's a lot of things that can come up, and when you are like looked to or sought after at work, a lot of times people come to you first, so they want to come to you because of your expertise, because of your experience, right? And so I've learned to say like, I'm really honored that you thought about me. I'm really, and flattered that you thought about me. But then but this isn't something that I'm, interested in taking on now. So that's like a way that I say no. But I think what's really important is having a criteria for what you do say yes to. And so that can look like, it can look a different ways. But I think coming up with a criteria, for you to say yes, number one is like, is this something essential? I think that's one of the questions that you should be asking yourself, right? Is this important? Like, but there's things that and before you say yes to everything and take on, you really need to ask yourself a couple questions. And I do have something that can help people kind of like walk through that. But I think number one is, do you have the capacity to
Mhm.
even take this on? Right? It's every idea, good idea isn't, means that you need to act on. So I think having your criteria or like things that like this is a thing that's the type of things that I will say yes to in this particular season or at this time, right? And if it meets that criteria, number one, it's contributing to a larger goal. I have the capacity, and resources to be able to do it. And you can come up with your own criteria, but I really encourage people to have a criteria for saying yes before you say yes to a project. Like, does it meet these four specific things, right?
Mm.
And if it does, then it's something that you're excited and happy to take on, then take on it. But if
Got
it
it.
doesn't, you can always recommend someone else. You can move it on, or you can just say, I'm really excited, flattered that you thought about me, and basically no.
So I guess that's really interesting. So I guess the other part of this that comes into play is, not everything's about work, and we
Hmm.
have things going on outside of work as well.
Yeah.
And when you've got commitments at home, you've got commitments elsewhere. How do
Yeah.
you follow your dreams? So let's talk a little bit about how you manage to sort of balance all this up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned during the intro that I'm a podcaster. I'm a mom of four,
Yeah.
right? And Yeah, it's really busy for me, especially at this season. All four of my girls, I have four girls, and they're all under 10, right? So this is a very busy season for me. And I started my podcast last year. And what I actually did to do it, it's something that was really important to me. So number one, I always go back to my values, like what's important to me in this season, right? And sometimes it'll fluctuate, right? In this season, like this takes precedence and I'm going to be focusing on this, right? But like, so it comes to like prioritizing what's important, what's my values. These are the things that I'm thinking of. Um, when I'm choosing where I'm going to spend my time. But one way, a lot of the times I get this question like, how did you find time to do a podcast when you're a mom of four, when you work full time, right? And I call it, I created a safe space for myself. And I say safe because, like, for me, this, m- that podcast was part of me, part of my journey of finding my voice and practicing and exercising that, right? So it was a development piece for me. It's something that was important and an important part of my journey. So I created, I say a safe space. And here I go again with these acronyms, right? It's actually SAFE, but this is how my brain works and how it thinks, right? So for me, I had to keep it very simple. So the S is for simple, right? And I had to make sure when I first started my podcast, I actually made it a little too complicated. So in the beginning, I had like, then I would put it on like the website, I had the blog, and I had this, I had like 10, 15 steps that I would go through, just to get to like publish. And then when I realized in order for me to be consistent and show up for myself, the thing that's important for me is to exercise and practice right now. I need to make this as simple as possible for me to follow through. So I
Right.
actually went back, I evaluated, and I made it simple. I started eliminating all the things that was not relevant to the goal. All the
Mm.
things that was getting in the way of me doing the thing, which was podcasting, which was hitting record and publish, right? And I made it really simple for myself. I actually made it so simple for myself where I told myself, right? I want to be consistent. I want to show up every week. And in order for me to do that, I need to make it really simple and easy. And for me, I said, if I can show up every week, even if it's just 7 minutes and bring value,
Yeah.
right? And use my voice to bring value, I would feel good about that. So that was my simplicity. The A
Okay.
is for authenticity, right? And that for me is like if you're creating something and you're doing something, like I'm not about to code switch, right? So if I created a space for me, like I'm going to be able to use my voice and show up how I want to and talk the way that I want to and not code switch and do all the things. And that was important to me to be able to show up in the most authentic way.
Right.
So I say authenticity because otherwise it's going to feel like a chore. Otherwise, it's going to get exhausting,
Right.
and you'll get burned out just trying to be someone else or like switching up and things like that. So,
Right.
I kept it simple. I try to make sure that it was as authentic as possible so I can show up as I
Yeah.
am every week. And then F was for fun. Like when it's not fun, like you're less likely to follow through. So I just try to make sure that I was keeping it fun. And I did every week that I showed up, even when times were hard, when things fluctuated in my life. I went back to, is it simple? Is it authentic? Is it fun? And then finally, the E for me is explorative. And that was really important. It takes the pressure off of everything. Like I was not going for perfection with this. I am practicing. I am leaning into curiosity. I am trying to learn something. I am exploring. And a lot of great things happen when we start to explore. And that was all I was doing. It's just being, keeping it safe. So I created a safe space. I say a safe space for myself to just be consistent. And that's really helped me. And it didn't take a lot of time because I was just keeping it simple, authentic, fun, and just being curious and exploring. So,
Well, that sounds really inspirational. And the simple, authentic, fun, explorative is a great framework. And does that generate that faith you were talking about, to follow your dreams?
yeah, yeah. And you know what? I think it definitely does. Because I think sometimes what gets in the way is that we think it has to be grand. You have this big dream, right? Um, and we're looking at the whole thing and you're having like it can be overwhelming, especially if your dream is grand or big or just whatever. But sometimes you actually just start with one step at a time. You're just
Right.
doing one thing, you know, and I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Oh, wow.
And I know that like I have faith in myself that I can show up for 10 minutes. Like I
Well,
have faith in myself that I can bring value. I have faith in myself that, you know, I will be able to figure this thing out and that I can learn and have fun. So I think that's definitely helped me to have that faith to just show up.
so some of the audience are obviously getting inspired by what you're saying here. But the other question I had for you, how far did you have to take it before you were ready to release your first podcast show or any project? Does it
Yeah.
have to be perfect out of the door?
Yeah, absolutely not. So it's funny when I look at my like podcast like queue, it says you've had this podcast for 4 years, but it's actually only been live for one. The reason why is for 3 years, I sat, I recorded, I did all these things, but I never pressed publish because it was never perfect for me because I was, in my head about the way that I sounded. I hate listening to my voice, on playback, a lot of just different things. And I just thought it had to be perfect. What helped me to move forward and actually take a risk is to let go of perfection, right? I heard someone, and maybe it was a comment or something, but the first pancake is never perfect, right? So like I want to be able to at episode 111 look back at the first one and say, wow, I came a long way, right? So I keep all the in those authentic moments in, I keep all the different things and those imperfections in because I think it's a good like journaling process as well too. You get to see the journey. And it doesn't have to be perfect to start. Just start. Just get it
Yeah,
done.
I mean, I've done that. I've like, do I get going? Do I not get going? And so many people have got so many ideas, and then all of a sudden they find that somebody else has sideswiped them and taken the lead on something that they had an idea on. So
Yeah.
upsetting when that happens.
Yeah. There's another saying as well too that really like kind of kicked me, to get going. It's if it's perfect when you first release it, you've waited too late.
Oh my
It
god.
should
Yeah.
never be perfect, right? And I
No.
wish I knew who actually said these things. I take it
Yeah.
so much, right? But I definitely didn't say it myself, but it's something that inspired me.
So that's interesting. So I want to sort of take this down another route as well. It sort of goes back to some of the early ones. I mean, you've already talked about the voice framework,
Mhm.
but finding your voice in your career, is that different to voicing up in a meeting?
It can be,
Okay.
but also voicing up in a meeting can be part of the story as well too, where you're finding your voice and you're speaking up and you're advocating. But I think when I think about finding my voice in my career, right? I think about like really getting in touch and aligned with what's really most important to me. I think a lot of times we're told to pursue, progression, pursue like the next thing, the bigger thing, pursue, the C-suite title or just whatever, right? We're told like what is, certain titles that, is supposed to be next for us. And I actually found, right, that in my career, sometimes like those things are less important. But instead of the title, think about like what's important to you. Think about what's going to be most fulfilling. When someone looks at my like resume, it looks like Sonia, did you take a step back? You went from a recruiting manager to a client lead, like this might look like a step back, right? If you're just thinking about titles, right? If you're
Right.
just thinking about, but when I'm thinking about what's most aligned to my career, most authentic, right? The scope and impact that I'm able to make today within my current role is what's most exciting to me. Is actually was, for me, even outside of just the titles, it actually was something that was enhancing, enlarging, and advancing my career,
Sure.
right? Even though, like, when you look at it, it's like, did you take this? Like, no. And I think so. When you find what's most authentic to you, sometimes like you might be in your career or be in a stage where it's like, no, I'm actually not pursuing a promotion, right?
Right.
People don't want to say that, but sometimes you might be in a space where what's taking most, what's most important to you is like, hey, I actually really love my role. I just want to keep killing it in this role. I want to, do well in this particular position. And so I think it's about getting clear on what you
Mm.
want. Sometimes it can look like transitioning, right? Sometimes, finding your voice in your career is like maybe you pursued a career that's not fulfilling because someone said so, right? Because you were supposed to do this. But it's about getting true to what you want and what your values are and starting to pursue that.
I think that's really interesting because I've been coaching a lot of people who have unfortunately lost their jobs in the recent tech layoffs.
Mhm,
And, you know, traditionally they were pursuing a position um, marked by a job title. And,
mhm,
one of the things I've been telling a lot of the people I help coach is actually, I don't think organizations are as hierarchical as they used to be. And you, as a senior vice president of something, actually, your skills are required somewhere else in the organization which doesn't hold that title. But
mhm,
from a compensation perspective and leveraging your value, it's right there in terms of your career trajectory. Would you
mhm,
actually decline it because it didn't have the title? And there's so many people who put so much more emphasis on the title over that
mhm,
voice. And the voice is really what I'm hearing is, what is it that you want to create impact with? That's the voice
mhm.
of your career, not the job title that you hold. Would that be right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, that's it, it's about pursuing the impact. What
Yeah.
impact do you wanna make?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's really, really interesting. Okay, well, I wanted to ask you um, about being a better communicator. I mean, you've heard some strategies of how to voice up, but in terms of
Mhm.
communication, how do you actually get heard? So you talked about how to sort of validate what you want to say, but how do you ensure you get heard?
Yeah. I think ensuring that you get heard, it starts with listening. And so, I think even before I started to voice up, I've always been observant, and I always listened. And I think that actually works to my advantage because, if you want to communicate with someone and you want to be a strong communicator, you got to know how to connect. And you connect with people by listening to what it is that they want, what they're saying, but then sometimes the things that they are not saying and what's important to them, because people want to know that you hear them, right? They want to know that, like, you're coming in without an agenda, right? You're coming in and listening. So I think the key to strong communication, a lot of times people will tell you, you want to be concise, you want to be this, like, let's throw all that out the window. The most important thing for me when I am in a meeting is like hearing and connecting with the person that I'm sitting across with, trying to figure out what it is that they're really saying, what they might not be saying, but can be communicating and saying, and what's most important to them. So I think that is probably the most important thing, is listening and then making sure that, I'm trying to get clarity to make sure that you truly understand. So then, okay, what route to take, what's the next thing. But I think
Awesome.
connection is the key to communication.
I think you've done a really good job of really summarizing today's topic, which is not summarize. Well, it is a summary because you dived deep into a lot of things, but how to get out of your own way and voice up. You've covered a lot of different facets. But let me just switch gears a little bit, slightly to the topic, but more towards you. What's one idea that experts in your field say that you disagree with what they are saying?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have to think about that a little bit. I think I think I talked about it a little bit, but what comes to mind is this idea that we have to be someone else. I think a lot of times when I'm hearing people talk about like how to become a stronger communicator, how
Hmm.
to own a room or just whatever, you have to be someone else. Um, and I don't think that's true. I don't feel like I need to become someone else or be inauthentic to myself. I don't think I need to be an extrovert to be able to voice up in a meeting, right? I think we can communicate in a way that still honors our most authentic part of ourselves. So you know, I think that we don't need to become someone else. We don't need to fake it. I think we can communicate in our authentic way. And if that room does not hold space for your authentic voice, sometimes that might not be the room for you.
Mm,
But I don't think we have to become someone else
got it.
or dishonor ourselves.
That makes sense, that makes sense. What about, who are your favorite people in your field that you like to follow?
Yeah. So one of my favorites, and it's in this whole realm of like speaking up, right? And being a communicator. is I mentioned her earlier. Her name is Elaine Lynn Herring, and she has a book that just released this week. It's called Unlearning Silence. I love her work on the whole topic of silence. She talks about how we silence ourselves and others, because sometimes not only do we, silence ourselves, but we also perpetuate like silencing others as well too. So there's certain things that we do, and I had the pleasure of having a conversation with her recently, and just learned so much. Some things that even kind of like changed the way that I looked at my whole journey of finding my voice as well too. So definitely Elaine Lynn Herring, someone I think we all should follow as well too.
Awesome. And we can get some of your favorite your links for the name of that book, and we'll put it in the description below,
Mhm.
if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so what's the favorite part of your job?
Yeah. My favorite part of my job, to be completely honest, when it comes to like recruiting, my favorite part is when someone like, okay, of course, obviously, like offer is set, but it's not about like a number for me. It's about when someone accepts an offer and they express about like how it's changed their life, the impact that I'm able to have in the process of someone making a career change. Like for me, that brings me so much like satisfaction, and that's why I do what I do. Like I absolutely love just seeing people create the careers that they want. Like I'm that like career cheerleader in the background. So it really inspires me. I get a lot of letters from the candidates that I work with, a lot of personal notes, and like I keep it in the folder, and it fuels me. It inspires me. It's like kind of like my why, when I think about like just, recruiting in general, but it really does inspire me. I love to see people's lives impacted and changed at work.
Well, that's really cool. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit to a bit of a rapid fire questions.
Ooh,
That's all
rapid
right.
fire.
Okay.
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 Yeah.
All right. So the first one is, what's your favorite book or books of all time?
Oh, I have 2. Okay, 2 that
Okay.
really
Okay.
just oh,
Go
it's
for
so
it.
hard for me to choose. Okay. So, one is called Playing Big by Tara Moore. So I read that probably like maybe 3 or 4 times. When I
Okay.
have a favorite book, I have like all formats, but
Got it.
that is one. It really impacted me. The other one is by James Clear, which is Atomic Habits.
Okay.
And I'm really sure that once I get through Elaine's new book, that's definitely going to be my favorite as well too. I'm so excited about
We'll have
it. So
we'll have
those
those
kind of like
books in.
3.
We'll have those in the list later in
Yeah.
the description. Okay. What's your favorite movie or show of all time?
Whew, favorite show, I think it would be Seinfeld. I know
Oh
it's an
wow.
oldie, but
Yeah, the
that's
oldies.
definitely yeah, definitely one of my favorite shows.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. What's your favorite meal, recently
Um,
or of all time?
yeah, I love gumbo. My husband makes the best gumbo dish, seriously, so my favorite meal for
Awesome.
sure.
Okay. What's your favorite song or album?
Ah, that's a good one. Okay. I have this song that it's more recent, but it's been playing in my head on nonstop, and
Okay.
it's, Beyonce's, 16 Carriages, and Texas Hold'em, like, her new songs that she just released, I'm just like, "Ah!" And, anyways, I've been listening to Beyonce's new releases recently and just can't stop, so
Awesome. Awesome. You're a Beyonce fan. Brilliant. Okay. So where can people go to learn more about you? And obviously, I hope there's some places we can put links in to learn, but
Yeah.
tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. So that's where I'm having a lot of conversations and, connecting with people. So that's the best way to connect with me, LinkedIn or sonjahomes.com as well too. That's my site as well.
Awesome. Okay. What can people expect from you next?
Yeah, really excited about this. So, it's actually completed. I actually just not had not released it yet, but as you can tell, I'm really passionate about people like getting in touch with their dreams. So, I created a 21 day like dream, and it's actually a audio, private audio podcast. So, 21 days they'll get a 1 minute prompt or question to help them really uncover and get in touch with their dreams so they can start dreaming again. So it's a
Okay.
21-day podcast private, and I'll be releasing it soon. It's all completed. I just need to release it.
Perfect. So, is there one final thought you'd want to leave listeners with before we conclude the podcast show?
Yeah, I guess if one final thought that I can leave with people, I would say like really try to get in touch with your inner voice, like
Mm,
in touch with your inner voice, what's important to you, and then dare to create the life that you want.
right. That's interesting. Okay. Um, how can listeners support your work?
Yeah. Well, you can check out the podcast. Own Your Work podcast is on, every, streaming platform. Yeah, you can listen to the podcast, connect with me, and all those things.
Awesome. And what was your favorite part of this episode?
Ah, I'm trying to think of my favorite part. I've really just loved I love the beginning too. Just those really just get to know you questions. My favorite question probably was like the breakfast thing. I don't know why I wanted to just share about that tradition so much, but I love those kind of questions where we just connect as a human and just get to know you on a personal level. So I love that. And I love the question of how you're really doing. You don't get asked that question these days. So I appreciate you bringing me on and really taking an interest in how I'm really doing.
Awesome. Well, I've got to say, come to the end of the show today. Thank you
Mhm.
to our guest today, Sonja Homes. It's been a true pleasure to have you on the show. I hope you all enjoyed the show today. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit reminders on the Hidden Heroes of Tech on YouTube for the full video episode. And then also, you can listen to this on any of the audio podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, etc., etc., etc. Well, I look forward to you joining me on the next episode. So, goodbye from me. Goodbye from Sonia. Say goodbye, Sonia.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
And hope next time.